and that conversation is a two-way process. It's useful to recognise the importance of active listening. So often people are only half listening to what you're saying, waiting for the first opportunity to leap in and put their own point of view before hearing you out. We need to listen to the message in order to find common ground where it exists. We don't want to get bogged down with vocabulary and terminology, disagreeing about details when we broadly agree about the nitty-gritty. To get the message clearly, we can ask questions and draw the message out. Just because you said something doesn't mean the other person understood you. Likewise, you may or may not get the gist of what someone else says to you. Sometimes you didn't when you think you did. Rather than make incorrect inferences, it may be wise to reinstate what was said to you or ask for clarification. I'm still learning that with a man I've lived with for 30 years. There'll be plenty of it'll never work folk on our journey who criticise the status quo endlessly, who are not active supporters of capitalism, but who do want it to work better for them. They just don't know how. This was touched on earlier, wasn't it? Why not let them tell us how and why capitalism is failing them? Let them build up their own case against it and agree with them on all possible points. We can't hurry it. We're not out to score points or win rounds, but to help people see clearly for themselves that the only solution is the replacement of capitalism and come around to our way of thinking because they are convinced by it. After the revolution, when we look back from nowhere, from our socialist world, we will be able to see just how many disparate groups working for their own ideas of democracy gradually coalesced into a whole cooperative socialist world community. People of wide cultural differences and varied perspectives from diverse communities will have developed distinct models. There will have been a multitude of different approaches and emphases, agreement on the principles, and differences in application. The majority will, after all, probably not have become party members along the way. But that is not the objective. The objective is system of society based upon the common ownership and democratic control of the means and instruments of producing and distributing wealth by and in the interest of the whole community, isn't it? So I'm moving on to the last part here, which is about finding common ground and making alliances. I read something recently on the Links to 21st Century Socialism website, in which the writer Ian Angus quotes Marx from Capital as saying, "Even an entire society, a nation, or simultaneously existing societies taken together are not the owners of the earth. They are simply its possessors, its beneficiaries, and they have to bequeath it in an improved state to succeeding generations." In effect, saying that one of socialism's goals must be to build a society in which human beings work consciously to be, in Angus's words, good ancestors. Well, I guess that rings true for all of us here, but it also rings true for millions, if not billions, around the world. How many folk do you speak to who want to see a more favourable future, a better world for their children and grandchildren, looking for real possibilities long term, credible alternatives? I'll stick my neck out and suggest a whole world view, not just a tiny introspective view from some of the 1% of the world's population in the UK, that there are many, many communities, societies, movements and alliances working together to reclaim control over their own lives, their livelihoods and their environment, all outside of officialdom or formal authority, in opposition to government policies forced on them for purely economic reasons. People wanting to work together in the way they know works best for them. Here at home and around the world, we have to discover what it is that people really want. We have to get them to look closely at what they do have and don't have in terms of democracy, at why so many are dissatisfied with their current situation, but at the same time will tolerate and even defend the status quo. We will constantly be bumping into people, both at home and abroad, whose assumptions are that we, the West, the developed countries, the rich world, live in a democracy, which could possibly be improved. But for those who've already accepted the uselessness, ineffectiveness, the distance of governments from the masses in terms of representation, we can focus on the separate issues that matter to us collectively. Common ground. It's about widening the discussion of how we and they can move closer to where we want to be, rather than just niggling about what we don't like and don't want. Identifying others' grievances helps build our case. If we focus on commonalities rather than differences, we can get a whole lot further than by turning someone off by trying to score points or engaging in an argument about details or simply not letting them get a word in edgeways. I talked earlier about associations of people on a global scale, but it's worth all of us checking out our own local scene in terms of what's happening on various fronts where we might find common ground. For instance, is there a transition initiative in your town? What are they doing in your area? What environmental, permaculture or green organisations are there? What about food co-ops or exchange groups like Let's Link? What meetings are taking place and who's giving the talk? Whatever the issue, we have a viewpoint to express, so let's express it as widely as possible. Notice I'm not talking specifically about political meetings, but every issue is implicitly political for us. Here's Ian Angus again, talking about being inclusive. He was talking at World at a Crossroads, Fighting for Socialism in the 21st Century in Sydney in April this year. And he cited as an example Gus Speth, who he was senior environmental advisor to both Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton, and who in the 1990s was administrator of the United Nations Development Programme and chair of the United Nations Development Group, and who now is Dean of the Yale University School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. After 40 years of working within the system, Speth published a book in which he wrote of the systemic failure of capitalism. That is, that it's the system itself that is the cause of the environmental destruction in the world. And as Angus says, although they're not Marxists, we should work with people like Speth because there's so much in common. Speth's argument against capital, after working so long in it, is very strong. Common ground. Regarding ecology and climate change, as socialists, we've long faced up to the fact that capital and capitalism's governments will not address these and other problems. However, we could view this as another opportunity to connect with all manner of different groups. We have to explore all avenues to expand the base. Capitalism has created huge divisions between societies and between humanity and nature, and part of our task is to